Hi everyone and welcome to the ITSM crowd. My name's Claire Agutter and our topic today is HumanOps. I've got a weird filter effect on today. My face is pixelated. I'm not sure why, but I'm quite enjoying it. It's hiding the bags under my eyes. We've got two amazing guests with us today. We've got Daniel and Hannah, and I'm going to ask them to kick us off by introducing themselves. So Daniel, if we can go to you first, please tell us a bit about yourself.
Okay, so Daniel Breston, a long-time part of the ITSM crowd and talking on a variety of subjects. Now principal consultant at Virtual Clarity, helping organizations use technology better, faster, safer. And Claire was the one who introduced me to the great Hannah and also this topic that we're going to be discussing today. So thank you both.
You're very welcome. And Hannah, tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Hannah Foxwell and I work in customer success at Pivotal. I've been involved in a HumanOps community since 2016 and I organise the HumanOps community meetup in London, and I'm also an organiser of DevOps Days London.
Thank you very much. So we are doing this broadcast live. So if you've got any questions that you would like to ask Daniel and Hannah, or even anything that I might be able to help with, if you pop them onto Twitter and use the hashtag ITSM crowd, we will be monitoring that during the broadcast. And after the broadcast as well, we do continue to monitor it so we can take follow-up questions then too. I have to confess to being slightly overwhelmed with the number of things that have ops on the end of them now, because I am, as you will know if you watch this regularly, I am a huge advocate of lifelong learning. So I try and keep on top of things. But after DevOps, BeerOps, DevSecOps, BizDevOps, I started to get a little bit baffled. So when I started to hear about HumanOps, I was actually really, really intrigued. And as it's always good to start with a definition, I wonder if Hannah, you can kind of just explain to us a little bit more about what HumanOps means.
Yeah, sure. I can talk you through the sort of origins of HumanOps, and then I'll talk maybe about what it means to me, because I have my own interpretation of it. So HumanOps was created in 2016 by Server Density, and Server Density is a monitoring platform. Basically what that means is their product wakes people up in the middle of the night when things go wrong. If the product's not used appropriately, and if poor practices around on-call are implemented within those organizations, then actually it can really hurt people. And that's what they were finding with a lot of their customers. People were suffering with alert fatigue. They were suffering from stress and anxiety and sleep deprivation. And there are very well documented health impacts of all of those different things. You can see links to diabetes, to cardiovascular disease, to obesity. These are serious human impacts of poor IT practices. So the HumanOps movement was created to promote sustainable and healthy practices within IT operations. I met David, who was the founder of this in 2016 at the very first HumanOps meetup in London. And I was, so enthusiastic to champion it. I got involved from day one. I later actually joined Server Density because I was like, actually, here's a company that cares about the things that I care about. And yeah, the HumanOps community has just kind of grown organically from then. So there's HumanOps communities that have popped up all over the world. There's HumanOps communities in Germany, in France, in the UK. There's a few in the US. And I think it's just a topic that a lot of people really care about at the moment, because there's still far too many people in our industry who are suffering from, basically just not doing on-call properly.
Yeah.
To kind of expand the picture slightly. So at the time that I got involved in HumanOps, I was doing some DevOps consultancy work. And what I was finding is that the challenges to implementing technical practices like continuous delivery were almost always human. And so we've got this wider context around HumanOps, which is actually the pace of change And the way that we deliver technology now is changing dramatically. And there's a lot of people who are having to adapt to that. And, you know, these are human problems. These are talking about rebuilding trust between development and operations. We're talking about, you know, having shared goals and shared ownership of how applications run in production. So that's the kind of bigger picture in which HumanOps exists, in that actually there's a whole lot of human challenges happening in technology right now, and we all have to kind of work together to address those.
Yeah. And is it restricted just to IT then, or is this something that's bleeding out into what I guess we'd call the business as well? You know, is it something that has a wider implication as technology becomes more integrated into everybody's role?
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. The last meetup we ran in London, we focused on ethics in technology. So that's a bbigger picture once again. So HumanOps started as, well, this is about the making life better for the people holding the page here. Then the next level of it is actually your whole technology organization is transforming and needs to continuously evolve. And the bigger picture is actually, you know, what are we delivering and what's the human impact of those applications that we're putting in the hands of our customers? And that's what we talked about last time. You know, we're not just talking about, you know, really obvious abuses of technology, you know, in like weaponized systems or fake news or, you know, all of that stuff. But, you know, some of the more subtle things like device addiction, addiction to social media, you know, the mental health problems that's causing for young people today. So that is definitely the larger context in which this exists. It is all about the human impact of technology.
Yeah, and I think any of us who've ever had the phantom phone buzz in the pocket and then you realise you're not even holding your phone, it's that kind of thing that makes you think.
Exactly. I mean, technology touches everyone now. There's no escaping from it. So we are working in technology. So we have a voice in these conversations, and we can ensure that the use of technology is ethical.
Yeah. And Daniel, I think I'll bring you in at this point because I saw a tweet from Hannah looking for some volunteers. I think it was for the HumanOps meetup, and I linked that to Daniel because I know Daniel's based in London. And from what I saw, Daniel, you came back thinking that this was one of the most important things you'd seen for quite a while. So tell me a bit about how you felt when you first heard about HumanOps.
Well, Hannah's story makes me laugh in a way, but I was on call at a bank, and the way you were on call at the bank was they called you at home, and if you went out, you had to get the phone number of the restaurant or disco, or in my place, or in my view, the country western bar that I would be at, so they could call and ask for me, and then I would have to, you know, leave and go into work, and then from there you get to, you know, pagers and all the other stuff, and the stress that put onto individuals. Yes, then there was the it's your fault. Well, whose fault? Then there was the do it anyway. We know that it's going to break, but you're on call to be able to fix it. There was depression. There was being on a program of change where one of the individuals actually passed away due to stress.
Wow.
Oh no! Well, exactly. It is as serious as that.
It's a serious issue, and if you go and investigate, and then Hannah touched on this briefly, you know, it's not just the people impact, but now you've got AI coming in, and what are we creating for who? You know, some of these people are outsourced individuals from relatively poor countries who can't say no because this job of coding is what pays the rent, is what gets them food, is what clothes their family. So the fact that their code is allowing individuals to do things that are questionable, if not illegal and immoral, that's neither here nor there. And if you can continue to research this, the term technoethics actually goes back to 1977, which surprised me. There was a person by the name of Marlo Bunge, Mario Bunch, excuse me, who started writing about this, and then it became a huge 2-volume book, and lots of other people joined in, and they started talking about all this stuff. And then just very quickly this year, Claire, as you know, and I've never seen this in our industry before, but in the last few weeks, we've lost individuals that are, it's one thing to hear a story. It's another thing to actually know the people that's passed away.
Yeah.
And the impact of that on some individuals, some of us are starting to feel a little bit mortal here. And several of the individuals had no health-related issues. It was an accident, but they're gone. And that ripple effect through the entire industry was, like a tsunami. So it's all of this. So that when I went and listened to Hannah talk, and I went and listened to the people that she brought in talk, who are, half to a quarter of my age, it was interesting to note that they were the ones who were voicing this. I never would have had the courage at their age to say this, because that would have been a career decision. And not a good one.
I think so, and I think there is a recognition that the style of management needs to transform if you want your business to transform. We want to build learning organizations, and learning can't happen in an environment where you're afraid to fail. And traditional management, top-down management, where your manager is always right and you assume that they know more than you, or you do what they say because they're more important. It just is not conducive to an evolving, adaptable organization. You need people to be able to think for themselves. And blame culture is one of the kind of nasty side effects of that sort of traditional management style.
And I think it's interesting. I think particularly for myself and Daniel, who've got quite a service management background, one of the things that I've been mulling over in my mind recently is because the traditional service management conference is, and I don't mean any disrespect here, but it tends to be fairly middle-aged, fairly white, fairly male. And one of the things that has kind of struck me as a contrast recently is that a lot of the DevOps conferences I see, there is much more focus on inclusion, diversity, protection. You've got people signing presentations, you've got quiet spaces, you've got childcare, and there is very much a different approach almost that seems to be coming from the DevOps world, and that's been very interesting to me. And I don't know if it's generational or if it's just different focus areas, but for something that we think of as the technical part of our industry, or the more technical part, it's interesting to see so much focus on human beings.
It is. We've been called hippies. Like the DevOps community is hippies, and we all meet up and we all hug each other, and we all talk about our feelings, and it is because if you think about like the tools and technology that need to enable DevOps, that is deeply technical. It is, it's very dry, but the intention of DevOps as a movement was to break down those silos and improve collaboration. So at its heart, it's a very human movement. And we have been called hippies more than once.
But it's interesting that the individuals that went and created the code of practice the code of conduct at a conference, or the code of conduct within the DevOps community itself, are my age. So so John Willis, isn't young. He's, no offense, John, but he's an individual that, and a lot of people are taking the opportunity to do what Hannah just said, which is, this is a different way of doing stuff. The ITSM community probably knew about, the different types of management style, but we never put it into the books.
Yeah.
Whereas, as you well know, the DevOps community, you can't open up a DevOps book or a course without being faced with, these are the different types of behavior, and these are, anti-patterns. We didn't have anti-patterns in COVID or ITIL or any of the other stuff, right? I mean, these are different terms that people are starting to use now, and I think it's allowing individuals to have the opportunity to reflect. And I know Hannah does a lot of, discussions about people reflecting. So, I'll be quiet now, but it's that reflection. This is the first time I've been in IT since 1972.
Mm-hmm.
It's only recently that you've been able to sit back and go, okay, hold on. I picked a great career, but is this really right, what I'm doing?
Mm. Yeah, and I think many of the working practices, the guidance, historically focused on the things that were being done rather than the people that were doing them. So if I think back to when I worked on a service desk, it was all about the calls that you answered, the length of time, the bounce rate. There was nothing about, how are you feeling as an agent? If you're hitting all your targets, are you stressed? How did you feel when that person shouted at you? Whereas I think now that there's less specialization, as in, this is about managing the work, this is about the people. We have to look at all of it cumulatively, and that's where this kind of focus on things like employee experience comes in, because if your employees aren't happy, then your customers are not going to be happy because they're not going to enjoy that interaction.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is what the reality of working in technology today, because every single business is reliant on technology to be successful, and they're all at different stages of that evolution. We've got pure 100% online only businesses, and then we've got traditional bricks and mortar companies like in retail or in banking that are trying to evolve towards that state of being digitally native. And if you don't treat your people well, they have better options. They have somewhere else they can go. There are choices available to people. I work from home. I do a job that I could do from anywhere in the world, which means I could work for any company in the world, essentially. And that is the reality of working in tech today. So you do have to look after your people, because they will go elsewhere if you don't.
But there's a good and bad about working at home.
I personally love it, but obviously Claire does as well.
I work a lot from the house. I mean, obviously I'm at home now, but I work a lot from the house as well. But and the good news is I don't have to get onto a London tube. The bad news is that 9 hours became 10 hours, 10 hours became 11 hours. Somebody went and slacked me. So I went and joined a conference call in another country time zone. So you don't turn off.
Yeah, it's really important to have boundaries. I mean, for me, just having an office made the whole difference. So rather than doing my work at the kitchen table or in the living room, just having an office that I could shut the door on at the end of the day. I think you have to experiment and find out what works for you, because I also straddle a lot of different time zones in my job, which means that to work with the people I work with in Europe, then I feel like I need to be online in the morning. To work with the folks in the US, I need to be online in the evening. And so for me, what works is just taking a really long lunch break and leaving the house and going stomping out through the fields. I live near Clare in Yorkshire, so I just go out walking. And that provides me with the balance, so that I don't feel resentful about being chained to my desk for 14 hours a day. Yeah. But you have to create that for yourself. There's nobody who's going to tell me to do that. You have to manage that yourself if you're at home, because the number of hours you work and the amount of time that the amount of time you put into it is not visible to anyone. Only you know how to create that balance.
How are you differentiating, Hannah, ethics in technology and treating humans well that are either in technology or are impacted by technology? I mean, there seems to be a difference there. And how are you doing that, or do you think it's going to become merged together?
That's it. No, I do think they're fundamentally different, because the conversation about working in technology, we want to be talking about things that, they don't make sense to necessarily a much wider audience. We're talking about having good practices in our working environment, good routines, like healthy, sustainable, like expectations of you in your job. Whereas if you talk about the wider impact of technology, we're really talking about the apps that we build, and understanding like the potential side effects of the products that we're putting in front of our customers, and actually the good practices, like good product management, user-centered design, doing like sort of ethical reviews of the way that we're designing products. There's a great podcast called Digital Mindfulness that talks about actually, device addiction and how we can cope with that. But part of that is, like, do a review of the product that you've built, and actually understand how users are interacting with it. And you can see on Android and on an Apple, they've built in analytics to show you how much time you're spending on the screen now, and that didn't exist a year ago. It didn't exist a year ago, and that was the unintended impact of putting this supercomputer in your hand was that people became attached to it as an extension of yourself, and you get anxious when your mobile runs out of battery. It's like you don't say my phone's battery is dead. You say my battery is dead, and people know what you mean, and it's becoming part of who we are.
It's scary, because if you go into the iPhone store, or the Apple store, and you type in mental health, you come back with all these different apps. We'll monitor whether or not you're depressed. We'll monitor autism. We'll monitor PSD.
Yeah, let's gamify our mental health.
We'll gamify mental health. And I'm going, well, hold on. Some of this stuff is okay stuff, because the National Institute of Mental Health maybe has at least looked at it. Some of this stuff is a con. Dave missed the point.
Yeah, and then there will always be people who want to cash in on whatever new buzzword or is cool at the time. So
yeah, and I don't want to blow the scope of this hangout completely, but to me, it almost feels like technology is moving faster than anything else. So employment practices, ethics, everything, the technology is racing ahead, and our governance, our government, everything is struggling to keep up. And even things like looking after your employees is so important, but we don't have the years and years of experience of managing global virtual teams. We've got people in the gig economy who don't have somebody who's looking out for their well-being. They might be working with 4 or 5 different companies, and it's a huge topic, and it's brilliant to see, even in just one area of the world, kind of start to engage with that and start to just ask these questions about how should we be working, what should we be focusing on, what's important now. And I guess to bring us back to practicalities, if there are people watching this thinking, yes, this is important for my organization, where do they start? What should they be looking for? What should they be thinking about putting in place? How do we HumanOps our organizations?
I think for me, it is about continuous improvement. So there is not one thing that you're going to do that's going to solve all of your problems. And I think a lot of people are really searching for that silver bullet. And I'm sorry, but it just doesn't exist. One really fascinating thing to come out of the annual State of DevOps report was the trends of actually like where people's maturity is improving and where it's actually not improving. And you know, the best, the fastest, the most agile companies are getting better, and the folks who are only just starting on this journey and are struggling with it, they're actually taking steps backwards. You know, these things are hard, and you will potentially, things may get worse before you realize just how big the problem is. And then the only thing I can say is that, you know, you need to approach it incrementally, make one change at a time and make sure that change sticks, and then move forward. Because if you approach this like a project, if you say, you know what, I'm going to DevOps my organization in the next 6 months, and here's my Gantt chart of how I'm going to do it, you're going to fail. It's an ongoing process, and you're never done.
I think there's a lot of valid information now about this subject, and apologies to all the listeners, but I'm going to, you know, from a UK-based perspective, there's the National Institute of Mental Health, which has a lot of stuff that they write about. There's mind.org.uk and sane.org.uk that discuss it. There's, you know, Twitter hashtags now, you know, hashtag HumanOps, hashtag Keep IT Fit, where you can go and learn some things, or at least see that other people also have the same issues and challenges that you have, and maybe bundled with them, okay, to say, okay, well, how are you dealing with this, or what do you suggest, or, you know, talking it out. So, you know, I'm obviously I'm not a health
totally
practitioner, but
this is where the
talk it out.
For me, this is where the community aspect comes in, and why, you know, I've been an active member of the DevOps community for so long, and it's because you do need to learn from each other. Don't feel like you have to reinvent everything. People have tried lots of different ways of approaching these problems. Learn from their mistakes as well as their successes. And, you know, there's so much content online about this. You know, watch some talks by Google or Netflix and see, you know, they're running things at massive scale. Their problems are probably not your problems, but the way they've approached their problems is a really useful insight, because they are successful at what they do.
Yeah, and I think I'll just mention a couple of things that I've seen recently, because it has been, I think, particularly a tech industry practice or pattern to fetishize busyness and the all-nighters and the hard work.
Oh, the hero culture.
Yeah, and it was, I forget the name, but there was a video game company posted quite recently to say that people were working 100-hour weeks to get their product done, and they actually got quite a lot of backlash, which I think was quite positive, from people saying, you know, that's not an appropriate way to treat your people, that's not sustainable. And the other thing which I've seen recently, and I haven't had a copy of it yet, but the founders of Basecamp Software have written a book called It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work, talking about the fact that, you know, rather than giving your people beer and pizza so that they stay longer on a Friday, give them time off, give them longer parental leave, give them time to go do something charitable. And we're almost edging into the kind of the corporate sustainability and corporate social practices there as well. But I think we are starting to see a little bit of change. But, you know, whether it's in the tech world or the world in general, if we can stop fetishizing busyness and value people's productivity and output over the hours that they spend in the office, then I think that would be a huge step forward.
Yeah, I think about the work that we do. You know, this is knowledge work. This is problem solving. This is often creative work. That type of work, you know, it can't easily be time boxed. You know, you can't say that it's going to take me 3 hours to solve this problem and then just sit down for 3 hours and get it done. You know, sometimes you might need to actually step away from the keyboard to really think something through. Sometimes you might need to, you know, walk around the block with one of your colleagues to like mull something over. Like all of these things actually help us do our jobs. But you're right, like traditional corporate culture would see that as slacking off, which is obviously completely wrong.
Yeah. So that's the end of our half hour, which has just flown this week, and we have chatted all over the place. What we will do is we'll put a blog live tomorrow as well on ITSM Zone, and we'll include a whole raft of resources and links for you to kind of read into this one a bit further. But from my perspective, that's been hugely educational, and massive thank you to both of you, to Daniel and to Hannah, for giving up some of your time to just talk about this, because it's such an important topic. So thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Next month, our ITSM crowd is going to be talking about the results of the SIAM Global Survey, the first SIAM Global Survey, to look at the people who are working in the SIAM field. So I will see you all on the next episode of the ITSM crowd. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.